Welcome to the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Stephanie Haney in for Mike McIntyre. Thanks for being with us on your Friday. As data centers continue to pop up, a handful of concerned citizens in the southern part of the state have launched a campaign to try to get them banned. This comes as state lawmakers plan to study the impact of data centers in Ohio. A controversial mega site project proposed for Lorain County's Russia Township hit a snag this week when trustees unanimously voted against a zoning change for a 600-acre parcel of land, citing the vagueness of the request. Much of Northeast Ohio saw an unexpected show in the sky this week. A 17,000-pound meteor entered the atmosphere over Lake Erie before breaking up inland, likely over Medina County. A law that bans intoxicating hemp in Ohio, including THC-infused drinks and candies, goes into effect today. This is after a petition drive to delay the law fell short. And Ohio has now become the latest state to ban ranked choice voting. Definitely a lot for us to talk about today on this roundtable. And joining me for the conversations, we have IdeaStream Public Media's local government reporter, Abby Marshall. Thanks for being here, Abby.
Hi, happy Friday.
Happy Friday. We also have IdeaStream's criminal justice reporter, Matt Richmond, with us. Matt, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thanks.
And on the phone joining us from Columbus, we have State House News Bureau Chief Karen Kassler. Karen, welcome.
Hey, good morning.
Now, we can't take your calls on the Friday roundtable, but we would love to see your emails. You can send us those thoughts at soi@ideastream.org. You can also message us on Instagram at The Sound of Ideas. And with that, let's get into the conversations. Now, over the last few months, we've been talking about the pushback on data centers in the state over concerns including noise, water use, and demand on the electrical grid. Now, some people in rural southern Ohio want voters to decide whether the state should stop rolling out the welcome mat for data centers. The group wants to put it to a vote with a proposed constitutional amendment. So, Karen, this amendment proposal, what are they hoping to do with this?
Well, it wouldn't be a ban on all data centers. The goal would be to ban the mega AI data centers, anything that uses more than 25 megawatts. And this is a group of rural Ohioans in Adams County, which is southwest Ohio. And what they're hoping to do is get a lot of signatures in a very short period of time. Now, they've just started the process. They filed their petition with the Attorney General. He still has to approve it. He has to do that by next Thursday, this coming Thursday. And then if they get that to go ahead, they can go to the ballot board, and then they can start the process of gathering more than 413,000 valid signatures, which means you got to gather a lot more than that. And they've got to do it by July 1st if they want to make this year's ballot. So it's a tall order ahead of them. But when I talked to one of the group members, she said, hey, we think we've got a good argument here.
Okay, so it is a long process ahead of them, but they're going to make a go for it. We know, Karen, a lot of the data centers already in the state are in rural parts in Ohio, and the people behind this proposed amendment are from rural southern Ohio, Adams and Brown counties. And they're upset about lack of transparency from decision makers. What is it about that that's bothering them?
Well, they say that in their conversations with local officials, they've been told that non-disclosure agreements prevent certain information from getting out. They also said they're worried about things like land use and water use. And right now, the EPA is in the process of coming up with a new way to regulate discharge of water from data centers, because data centers use an awful lot of water. And so they're concerned about that. And, you know, for a lot of people in rural Ohio, they live in that area or they moved to that area because of the climate, in terms of there's not a whole lot of activity going on. There's not a whole lot of big buildings and that sort of thing. And so they're concerned about these places going in on these huge sites and taking up big swaths of their rural counties. And so, you know, it's the second proposal that we've seen from citizens trying to push back on what they think the state government is doing wrong. And it goes along with the other one I'm mentioning, the move to abolish property taxes. That's another all-volunteer effort put together by a group that was frustrated with what property taxes have been in Ohio. So we've got these two out there that really show there's a growing frustration with those two issues and with state government and even local government in general.
So when we look at the data centers, some things that people kind of try to look at when they're thinking about this are jobs that are created, but that seems to also be a concern for these people. What are they saying about that?
Well, there's some questions about the jobs that are created. And for our TV show, The State of Ohio this week, I spoke to two people who are on opposite sides of the political fence most of the time. Hannah Halbert from Policy Matters Ohio, which is a progressive group, and Greg Lawson from the conservative Buckeye Institute. And they agree that this is a bad idea to just ban these large data centers. They think there's other ways to deal with the current issues here. But the question of how many jobs are created, conservatives, the Buckeye Institute, state government has been saying that these things do create a lot of jobs. The Ohio Chamber of Commerce says 95,000 jobs in Ohio as of 2024 were connected to data centers. But there are others who say there's really not a whole lot of evidence that that's what's happening, and that a lot of these jobs, while they are good union construction jobs, good paying jobs, are temporary, and that these places, for the size that they are, they really don't employ that many people, and yet they're getting these big tax breaks. And so there's some real questions about how much is the state and local government paying in terms of tax breaks for the jobs and economic development that's created.
That's interesting. And if you think about the jobs being related to the data centers, if they are primarily construction, that would hold true for anything that would go in the place there, not necessarily a data center. So when we are looking to the lasting impact of the data centers, we do know that that's something that lawmakers are looking at, data centers in general. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, one of the things that's really top of mind at this point has been this provision in the state budget that would have eliminated a sales tax break for construction costs for data centers. So basically, it would make it cheaper for data centers to get built in Ohio if that tax break exists. Now, lawmakers wanted to take that away. Governor Mike DeWine vetoed that. So it remains. So it's cheaper to build data centers in Ohio because of that tax break on sales of construction equipment and supplies and that sort of thing. And I think that's one of the reasons why we could potentially see even more data centers, even though you've got moratoriums from cities and you've got real concerns like from this group and others. There could be more data centers in Ohio. In fact, I think there could be a big couple of announcements coming, maybe even soon, about more data centers because Ohio has some key elements here. It has access to energy, it has land that's available, and it has a workforce. And those are the things that these data centers, these technology companies are looking for. And in fact, one from Microsoft, one of these execs from Microsoft told the New York Times, we don't even really need the tax incentives. There's no project he could think of that is looking at tax incentives or tax abatements in terms of siting. It's those three things. It's land, it's energy, and it's workforce.
And something we did talk about with jobs related to these data centers, Daryl emailed in asking about how many jobs data centers create and how much in property taxes or other taxes they pay. So Karen, thank you for addressing that. And Daryl, thank you for the comment.
And one other thing on that tax break, on that sales tax break for construction costs for data centers, it costs the state about $150 million a year, which again, it's still in effect. So that tax break still exists, but lawmakers are considering trying to override that veto and take away that tax break.
Now, you did mention some lawmakers who were saying it would not necessarily be a good idea to outright ban these data centers, but there is a plan for a data center study commission. Can you tell us about that, Karen?
Yeah, that's been interesting because it's really brought forward people who are opposed to data centers, and the lawmakers who are involved in this are saying, no, this is just a study to look at what data centers are doing and to not just rely on, say, the Chamber of Commerce. You want to find an idea, an independent analysis of what's happening with data centers. So that's moving forward. There's also a bipartisan bill that's been proposed that would extend a tariff that American Electric Power has agreed to pay throughout the state. Basically, it requires utilities to basically pay, it requires data centers to pay 85% of the costs of what they expect to basically use. And basically, the whole idea of that is really to try to not put it all on ratepayers for the use of energy that data centers have, but really to try to make data centers pay more of that. But the argument of that is, well, if data centers have to pay more for their energy, they're just going to build their own energy generation. And so then ratepayers will still have to pay more because the utilities won't be making money from the data centers.
We have an email in from Nancy as we wrap up this topic today. Nancy has a suggestion. Nancy says, how about we give that tax break to wind and solar? Nancy, thank you for writing into the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable. We appreciate it. Let's talk about a different kind of construction here in the state of Ohio. The plan to develop a mega site in Lorain County hit a snag on Tuesday. Russia Township trustees unanimously voted against an application to rezone a 600-acre piece of land from agricultural to industrial use. County officials back the plan, which supporters have described as a once-in-a-generation opportunity. But people living near the project are strongly opposed to the plan. Matt, can we first start by explaining what a mega site is?
Well, as far as I can tell, it's something that came up that sort of developers have created. There is something in state law called a mega project, and that was created to give kind of state incentives to developments like the Intel
Chip factory?
semiconductor chip factory in Columbus, and the hope that there would be more projects like that. But they call this a mega site because it's supposed to be above more than 1,000 acres, and owned by a single owner or kind of all ready for a development. So when you bring it to a developer, there are no complications about kind of land use rights in that piece of property.
Shovel ready is a
Yes.
term that I've heard.
Yes,
So
that-
very easy to get something up and going.
Yeah, enormous and quick to start work.
Okay, so we know the vote was already met with a standing ovation from township residents and opponents. Does this vote derail the project?
So that's an interesting question. The first thing is that the vote was about 600 acres of privately owned land that developers wanted to rezone to be able to make one of these big projects. It sits right next to close to 1,000 acres of county-owned land that's been kind of zoned for this sort of development for years, since like 2022. So they could find companies to go into that piece of land. Then the owners kind of have the right to challenge this decision in court. And then there's a process too for being annexed. So these landowners could ask Elyria, for instance, the city of Elyria, to kind of take their land in, and then the decision would be up to Elyria how this land should be zoned. So,
And there's a $67 million state loan that's potentially impacted here?
yes, and that is kind of towards the bigger project. The county commissioners want to create a sewage system in that part of the county, which would really open up from north of Oberlin up to the lake to development, and it's really an agricultural area now. And so they want to put a pipe from where this mega site is to another pipe that runs north, and then build likely a new wastewater treatment plant. And so that $67 million was to plan for that project. And the county commissioners that I've spoken to say that's still planned for, and we're still full speed ahead with that.
Okay, so opponents of this project are complaining that there's little information known about what would go on this mega site. Is that information that is known that is not being shared with them? Is that information available?
So there's no, as far as anybody knows, there's no like formal agreement with any company to go in there. They're the county, and it's also being prepared for by Team Neo, the economic development agency in this region. And so they've said that they've had companies come to them. This whole thing sort of started back in 2022 when there were visits by representatives from semiconductor chip manufacturers. And they said, if this site is going to have a company like ours come into it, you need to make it larger. You need to get more of the infrastructure in. So there's been interest, and they've talked to companies, but nothing formal yet.
Okay. Now, Lorain County missed out on the Intel project, which you mentioned earlier. That's the massive multi-billion-dollar semiconductor manufacturing campus being built very slowly near Columbus, Ohio. That project has hit delays, which has worried residents there. So what are the concerns related to those delays?
Well, so the idea behind this project and collecting all this land together and making it ready for a developer was a big kind of single company like that, and then then around it there would be suppliers and other kind of economic development that would be connected to it. But the initial idea was something big like that, and it's not. Times have changed since 2022. There's not kind of that optimism that companies are going to come the way that it was thought that they were going to come back then. And so a lot of residents say we don't want any of that, but we particularly don't want to be stuck with something like a data center where there aren't many jobs, where it takes a lot of water has a lot of power needs and where it just disrupts life here and the benefits are minimal. So now we're going to have to go through all of this for, what exactly?
Yeah, who knows what? Definitely
Yeah.
a lot of unknown there. So, Matt, what's next for the project now that this vote's happened?
Well, like I said, the county commissioners are full speed ahead to get that sewage in. And, in the award from the state and in their application, having something in that mega site is sort of central. And that the state said, we're giving you this money to prepare sewage because there's a company moving into that site. So, they can get somebody into that airport. And then on that 600 acres of where the rezoning failed, the landowners there have options, and they could try to force something to happen there. And the trustees at the meeting this week said, we know that we want to make sure that there is something that makes this area sustainable. We're not against development, period. We just want the developer, we want the county, we want to have more of a conversation with residents. We feel like this was forced on us. So you may see it go forward in more of a collaborative way as opposed to like, this is what we want to do. So, accept it.
Okay. Well, from something big and potentially unexpected in Lorain to something big and unexpected in the Northeast Ohio sky, Northeast Ohioans got an unexpected free show in the sky this week when a meteor streaked across the region and broke up over Medina County. Now, according to NASA, the space rock weighed 17,000 pounds and it was 6 feet in diameter. It broke apart traveling more than 40,000 miles per hour, creating a wave of pressure and a loud boom heard across much of the area. Some cameras were able to catch the streaking ball of fire as it made its descent through the atmosphere. Now, Abby, people were certainly surprised by the meteor, but is this a rare thing that happened?
Finally, we're getting to the big, important story of the day. Yeah, I mean, I think we were all chatting before with our little anecdotes of what we heard and not thinking much about it. But I think what really freaked me out when I heard a loud boom, especially living in the city of Cleveland, I didn't think much of it. But getting on Facebook and seeing people from Beechwood to Westlake, like, what could it possibly be? But actually, this is the second meteor that has come in across Ohio skies in a little over a month. They don't think that anything touched down. Typically when meteors come into the atmosphere, they burn up and break apart before they ever touch anything. It's just that loud, when something's traveling faster than the speed of sound, that's what created that sonic boom and that phenomenon that bonded us all on St. Patty's Day. We went from 75-degree weather to snow to a meteor. So something, I don't know, Cleveland is either blessed or cursed. I don't know.
There was something in the air, and it was a meteor in this case. Matt, did you hear the meteor?
I did, and my house shook. But, I was busy.
Yeah, that was kind of, we were like, hello. I did give a cursory hello in case someone came in and then kind of shrugged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unbothered. I have serious FOMO, actually. I was down here in the studio when this happened. Sound of Ideas kicks off a little after 9 a.m. So I didn't hear it, but I definitely saw all of the reaction on social media after that. And so some people are wondering, they're questioning, why didn't NASA track this object? Why didn't we know this was coming? So why, Abby?
Well, as I said, it's the sheer speed of how quickly these things move. So by the time it was even able to be detected, locally it was already coming into the atmosphere. But also think about a big hunk of space rock that's just black up against the vacuum of space, right? It's really hard to see unless sunlight is reflecting off of it. So, it's one of those things where we didn't know until it was just a happy surprise, I guess. Since no one got hurt, we can call it a happy surprise.
That's true. That is definitely happy. Heather actually wrote in and said people are looking for meteor debris. There's been no report of damage caused by this debris. We're very thankful for that. And Heather is wondering, how likely is it that there is some debris with no reported damage? We know people are looking. What do we think?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed all these stories about the meteorite hunters. And even before the show, I was kind of looking up pictures of meteorites to see, especially when you're talking about the Hinckley area, Medina County, where they believe that a lot of this fell. I don't know how you would detect just a regular rock in a park from a meteorite. I was looking at this thing that said meteorite versus meteor wrong of how to identify them. So I don't know, maybe the people, I saw that people were coming from all over the country to come to come look for them, so maybe they have a more skilled eye. But I think though, if we find it, it's got to be a Northeast Ohioan that finds it. I would be so sad if someone came. I guess if you make all that effort, but yeah, I don't know. I'll be interested to see if anyone comes forward with verified meteorite.
I'll be honest, if I find some meteor debris, that's going on eBay immediately. Now that I know people are coming from other countries to look for these things. All right, we're going to take a quick break now. When we come back, we'll talk about the ban on intoxicating hemp that goes into effect today in Ohio. This is the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable. I'm Stephanie Haney in for Mike McIntyre. We'll be right back. You're with the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Stephanie Haney in for Mike McIntyre. As we wrapped up the first portion of the show today, we were talking about the meteor that came across the sky here in Northeast Ohio, and Lucy from Seven Hills wrote in, I saw one at West Creek Reservation in Parma about 8 years ago. No sound or tail, beautiful. But this one I heard. Lucy says, I thought a tree landed on our Seven Hills home. Screamed. Her husband was in the basement with water running and didn't hear it and was disappointed he missed it. That a lonely meteor finally reunited with Earth. Lucy, thanks for sharing that with us. Sorry you had the scream. And sorry you had to experience that alone. We need to check on the sound there in your basement there. Now, a reminder before we get back to the roundtable, give our IdeaStream news quiz a try. It tests your recall of the week's news as produced by IdeaStream and the State House News Bureau. You'll find a link to the latest quiz on our homepage at ideastream.org. And now back to the roundtable. Here with me today, we have Matt Richmond and Abby Marshall of IdeaStream Public Media, and State House News Bureau Chief Karen Kassler calling in from Columbus. Now, as the bodies of 3 Ohio airmen were brought back to the United States on Wednesday, Governor Mike DeWine and First Lady Fran DeWine paid their respects alongside President Donald Trump. All 3 of the fallen service members were with the 166th Refueling Squadron based out of Rickenbacker Air National Guard Base near Columbus. They died during a refueling mission in Iraq in support of Operation Epic Fury being conducted in Iran. Our thoughts are definitely with their family and their loved ones at this time. Now, the bribery case against 2 former First Energy executives is in the hands of the jury. Deliberations began Wednesday. Chuck Jones and Michael Dowling are accused of bribing the former chair of the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio as the company sought a nuclear bailout that eventually was passed as House Bill 6. Now, Karen, the defense had disputed that any bribery took place. What's the argument they're making?
Well, the defense, and it's 2 separate teams here representing former CEO Chuck Jones and former Vice President Michael Dowling. They have separate lawyers, but their defense is kind of similar in that basically their defense is that the late former Public Utilities Commission chair, Sam Randazzo, took the money that was meant as a legal settlement for his clients from First Energy and that he stole it. So there was no bribery. And one of the arguments, too, that was made by Dowling's lawyer is that not only did Randazzo steal this money that was intended for his clients, but also that he was not a public official when this happened. He was not the Public Utilities Commission chair when that payment was authorized. And so if there was no bribery because he wasn't a public official, then they said the case completely falls apart. So it's been an interesting argument because, of course, Sam Randazzo is not there to defend himself. He was charged alongside Jones and Dowling, but he died by suicide in April of 2024. So that's kind of formed the prosecution's argument, which is that the defense is basically throwing everything on Randazzo and saying Randazzo was the bad guy and don't consider anything we did because he was the bad guy.
So any idea when we expect these deliberations to wrap up, Karen?
If I had a crystal ball, my job would be so much easier in general. I mean, I think it's interesting. You know, I had suspected that if they came back quickly, it would be an acquittal because they would have potentially bought this argument that if there was no bribery, then the whole case would have fallen apart. But it's been 2 days now, I think, of deliberation. So I don't know. I know the jury did ask one question to kind of clarify what bribery actually is in the law, but we're still waiting to hear. So.
Okay. Let's move on now to a new Ohio law that bans intoxicating hemp, and that goes into effect today. And this was after efforts to block it fell short. This includes a ban on hemp-infused THC drinks and candies, which I know several people who will be bothered that they'll be having to reach for something else when they go out for drinks these days. Karen, what does this mean for things that were legally being sold in Ohio yesterday?
Well, those that intoxicating hemp that can only be sold through retailers that are authorized by the state. So basically, marijuana dispensaries, and then those THC and CBD infused drinks, which you can find all over the place, they are banned as well. Now, they were potentially going to be banned anyway because of action at the federal level that was part of that one big beautiful bill, or I'm sorry, it was part of the settlement of the shutdown last fall, but Governor Mike DeWine had been really clear that he wanted something to happen here with regard to intoxicating hemp. And his argument has been that this is stuff that was unregulated and kids could access it. It was being sold at convenience stores and gas stations, and he wanted more regulation. So Senate Bill 56, this bill kind of combined those two things of intoxicating hemp and also making some changes that lawmakers had wanted to make to the marijuana law that voters approved in 2023.
And we do know that the governor struck out a measure in the law that would have carved out a short-term exemption to allow these things to continue to be sold. So why did that happen?
Well, he basically said that that was not appropriate, that there shouldn't be that carve out. If we're going to ban intoxicating hemp, we're going to ban it. And so that sparked at least one, if not two lawsuits, depending on how you count it. There's a lawsuit in the Ohio Supreme Court from some of these brewers who were saying this was overstepping his bounds, I guess. And then there was also a lawsuit that was filed only on Tuesday trying to stop this law from taking effect. And late last night, there was a ruling in Franklin County from a judge saying this lawsuit's been rejected and the law can go ahead and go into effect. There's also this repeal effort that was working toward trying to gather enough signatures to put this before voters this fall. And this was a group, again, of hemp retailers who were trying to stop the law. If they got enough signatures by yesterday, they could have stopped the law from going into effect. They announced, I think it was late Wednesday, that they were not going to make that. And so the repeal effort at this point has completely failed, and the law is in effect.
Another new law in effect is related to dangerous dogs in Ohio. And those changes are collectively known as Avery's Law, named after a teenage girl near Columbus who was attacked by two pit bulls while she was visiting a friend's house for a play date. Now, Karen, these changes put the responsibility on dog owners to make sure their dogs are contained. How so?
Well, this basically says that owners of dangerous or vicious dogs must have at least $100,000 in liability insurance. They must keep their dogs confined when people are coming over. They've been invited on the property, and they could face stiffer penalties if they fail to keep their dog from biting or attacking someone. And this comes from a case, this girl, Avery, she was attacked by a dog. And I mean, it was really devastating testimony here. And it was actually chronicled in the Columbus Dispatch by my colleague Laura Bischoff about how much she went through and the pain and suffering she went through because she was attacked when she was on a play date seeing a friend. So this really tries to, and there have been other cases. That's just one. There have been other cases where even there have been people who have died after being attacked by vicious dogs. So this just gives puts a little bit more on the owners of the dogs to make sure that those dogs are confined so that when people come over, they're not at risk.
Mm-hmm. The law also gives dog wardens more authority to seize dogs. This is kind of viewed as a one-strike law. How is that working?
Well, it would require dogs to be put down that seriously injure or kill a person in an unprovoked attack. And so, I mean, I think the law before that kind of gave a little bit of a grace period or a second chance for some of these dogs, but this is definitely a euthanasia action if a dog is vicious in terms of an attack or, hurts a human.
And Matt, what about dogs protecting themselves, or maybe they're provoked or protecting their owners, and canine officers? How does that work in this?
Yeah, I guess you could say there's a bit of due process for the dogs if they are provoked or they're playing, and it sort of like maybe gets out of hand by accident. There are some, it's not just black and white. If a dog hurts you, the dog will be put down. There are some kind of exceptions, and then for canine dogs, they have kind of always enjoyed the similar kind of protections that any police officer would, like qualified immunity that kind of applies to a police dog. So.
Okay. Let's talk about something happening in Stark County, my hometown. The city of Canton has reversed course and will now allow water access for residential properties in Perry Township. Now, the city had stopped approving new requests and service transfers in early February. This is because of an ongoing dispute with Perry Township trustees over a Joint Economic Development District, or a JED agreement. Now, Abby, the water service denials were putting home sales in limbo. Did that have an impact on this decision to switch things up?
The announcement of this reversal came about a day after our colleague Anna Huntsman had reported on that house sale limbo, because who's going to buy or sell a house if you don't have guaranteed water hookup? So in Perry Township, about 4,000 residents get water service from Canton, but they had approved no new water hookups since February 5th. So that meant at least a dozen, Anna had reported, houses and homeowners could not sell the house. And so a day later, Canton's mayor said, we are having this legal dispute with Perry Township. We're having these problems, but we're not going to leave residents in the lurch.
Well, that's great for residential properties, but what about commercial and industrial properties in Perry Township?
Yeah, the city said that they're still unwilling to provide new water services to those commercial and industrial sites until the issues between the two governments are resolved.
Okay. And a data center in Perry Township is a sticking point between the two sides on this. Why is that?
Yeah, there's lots of back and forth about this JED, the Joint Economic Development Agreement between these two townships, and a lot of this, the sticking point is about the annexing power. So the JED says that the city of Canton can't annex other properties within Perry Township without the trustees' approvals for 50 years, and that seems to be the sticking point. Now, what the end game is, it's not clear to me, like what the ultimate goal is, but that seems to be what the major dispute is there.
Okay, thanks for that, Abby. Now let's talk about ranked choice voting. Now, this is a system where voters rank candidates in order of preference instead of choosing just one. Basically, the way it works is a candidate has to get more than 50% of the vote to win. If that doesn't happen, then the person who got the least votes in the first round is eliminated, and then the votes that went to that eliminated candidate then get transferred to the other people based on the second choice that those people had identified for that eliminated candidate. Now, this process continues until someone gets a majority of the votes, and then that person is ultimately declared the winner. Advocates say it makes elections more competitive, but opponents say that it's expensive and can be confusing. But those arguments don't really matter anymore in Ohio right now, at least not at the state level, because Governor Mike DeWine signed a bill on Wednesday that bans the use of ranked choice voting statewide and penalizes local communities that would use it. So, Karen, lawmakers couldn't ban ranked choice voting at a local government level, but they did make it very unlikely to be used. How does that work?
Well, once again, we run into this whole idea of home rule. Where is the line for state lawmakers and what they can tell local officials to do and local governments to do? And so here's an example of that, where they basically said that if a community wants to use ranked choice voting, they can, but their state funding will not go forward. So for a lot of communities, well, for all communities essentially, there's just no way that they could afford to lose that kind of money. And the Ohio Municipal League, which represents cities around the state, had put out a statement saying that they were disappointed in this and that they felt that these financial penalties were being used as leverage to make cities do what state government wants them to do. And there were only a handful of cities that were considering even doing ranked choice voting. The Ohio cities, several of them, used to do ranked choice voting back in the last century. Those cities now have to weigh whether it's worth losing all that state funding if they want to go ahead and use ranked choice voting.
Yeah, two cities actually here in Northeast Ohio were considering putting it on their November ballot to approve ranked choice voting, and that's Lakewood and Cleveland Heights. So Lakewood City Council has said that they are still kind of deciding what to do, but like Karen said, even if they move forward, they could be at financial risk.
Mm-hmm. We do have a couple of comments that have come in via email, which if you want to send in your comments to the Reporters Roundtable today, you can email us at soi@ideastream.org. Marvin writes, "The bill banning ranked choice voting is a glaringly obvious tactic for a party in power to keep an iron grip on their control, and their excuse that it's confusing is ridiculous. I'm pretty sure grade school children can understand it." Thank you for sharing that comment with us, Marvin. We also got another comment in from Steven. Steven says, Ranked choice voting is very easy to understand and is actually more efficient because it makes primary elections unnecessary, and that may actually be the main reason they don't like it, is whom Stephen is referring to, the Republican Party in power in the state of Ohio. So, Stephen, thank you very much for sharing your comment with us here on the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable. Again, if anybody would prefer to send in a comment and would like to make their thoughts known, you can email us at soi@ideastream.org. Now, Karen, lawmakers are increasingly using the power of the purse string to their choice of use here right now, especially towards schools, universities, and local governments. And voters are turning to referendum. So does this suggest a possible disconnect between lawmakers and voters?
Well, yeah, as I mentioned at the top of the show when we were talking about the data center amendment that would basically ban these big data centers if it does get to the ballot. Also, the amendment that would abolish property taxes. These are citizen groups who are frustrated with what they say is a lack of action by local or by state officials, and so they're just trying to go a different way. And there's always been this back and forth between state government and cities, especially as Republicans have controlled state government. There's a supermajority of Republicans in the House and Senate, and obviously Governor Mike DeWine is a Republican, whereas a lot of cities are run by Democrats. And so that back and forth, that struggle of what state government wants cities to do versus what cities say is best for them, continues on. But I think it's interesting to watch these efforts, the abolish the property tax and ban the big data centers, and then to think back just a couple years ago when we had an amendment that would guarantee access to abortion and reproductive rights, and also the marijuana law. Those were groups that were opposed to what was happening in state government and said they're going to take it to voters. So it's been interesting to watch some of this. And state lawmakers have in the past talked about changing the rules on referenda and making it harder to get to the ballot. And I think there's some concern about some of these groups, and they say it's outside money and outside influence, but some citizens say that they're really frustrated.
Did Governor Mike DeWine have anything to say when he signed the bill banning ranked choice voting?
No, he didn't. And he had said before that he didn't want to do any more bills that related to election laws, but he didn't have any statement on this one. So he did sign it, though.
Okay. Let's talk about something that has been on people's minds here in the city of Cleveland. The monitor overseeing the implementation of a federal consent decree focused on policing reforms in Cleveland has cast doubt on the push to bring the process to an end. Now, in mid-February, as some people pronounce it, I don't know why they would, but some people do, the city and the Department of Justice asked a judge to bring an end to the federal decree, which has been in place for more than a decade. So, Matt, why does the police monitor have doubts about ending the consent decree when the city and the Department of Justice want to do it?
Yeah, well, so I guess they're kind of focused on two different things. The city and the DOJ want to end it. The monitor is focused on whether the city has completed all the requirements of the police consent decree, and it's going to be up to the judge whether they can end it before they do what the monitor's focused on. So the monitor basically said in there, they just released their 18th semi-annual report, said that there are some areas like crisis intervention and like staffing where the city is basically done, that they've done all the requirements. There are other areas where they're close, like use of force, like search and seizure. And there are other areas that really a lot of work still needs to be done. And so that's kind of what the monitor got up and shared in a hearing this week. And those areas are officer accountability, some community engagement, particularly the way that the department interacts with some civilian oversight agencies like the Community Police Commission, and some other areas. And then parts of use of force, like the way that supervisors, kind of respond to uses of force, need work. And there's some questions about in search and seizure, about disproportionate stopping, searching, and arresting of Black drivers.
Now, in this request to end the consent decree, the Community Police Commission would like to have more say going forward. How would that work?
That's a good question. So they want first to be able to submit what's called a friend of the court brief. And in asking the judge to submit that brief, they also submitted it as an exhibit. So it's now on the docket. And basically they make the case that the city is not ready to leave the consent decree. There are a number of issues that the monitor has highlighted. And we as the Community Police Commission were sort of established by voters to be the entity that kind of continues the work after the consent decree ends. And we don't feel that kind of our relationship with the city is where it needs to be for us to be able to do that work at this point.
Now, the judge described the Community Police Commission request as unusual. Can you tell us about that?
Well, so, so first of all, the CPC is part of the city. The city is a party in the consent decree. So the city kind of is the one that speaks for itself through the law department, through sometimes the chief of police. Once, when he first came to office, the mayor got up and spoke in court. So to have this entity like within the city come and say that we want more involvement kind of on our own is unusual. And then, the Judge Solomon Oliver, made the point that there are lots of people who would like to get up in court and, kind of contribute their 2 cents on this. And so if I let the CPC in, who's next? Do I have to let the police union in? Do I have to let the NAACP in? Like, where does it end? And why would the CPC be special?
Now, the judge will be considering these various requests, and that may take some time. So while that happens, what does the monitor's role look like?
Well, that's an interesting question. They have their contract ends in the summer, June or July, I forget which one, but a few months where they're still going to be getting paid to work by the city, and they haven't yet submitted a plan for 2026. But from what we understand, they want to get through all the assessments of the city's progress. So that would be on officer accountability, that would be on promotions, that would be on community engagement, and there are several others. But they want to get through a lot of work this year. And right now, as far as kind of anybody can tell from the outside, they are going to work every day and continuing to kind of do the job of the consent decree for now.
Status quo until something else happens.
Yeah.
Staying in Cleveland, Cleveland is tweaking its new parking policies again. This is after the city put revised parking rules into place in January, which included dynamic pricing. Abby, why is the city changing the policy now?
Yeah, so beginning in January, the city began changing how parking policies were downtown. So now downtown, which previously had free weekends and free after 6, it is 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., 7-day-a-week enforcement. And also with that, the pricing policy changed as well, with the flat rate going away and instead kind of increasing per hour. So that has been changed in some parts of Cleveland. So we have areas in Playhouse Square, near CSU, Cleveland State University, where they have looked at Park Mobile data, which is the new app that was rolled out to replace the parking meters, to actually look at usage. Because before with coins, you couldn't tell when people are using it, how often, except when someone comes by and takes the coins out. So the city said that they will be looking at the usage and looking after some of those lesser used areas to adjust. And in that case, they took off the 4-hour cap, and that they said that there will be a flat $1.50 rate for 4 hours or beyond, since they took off the cap.
So we know the mayor wants people to know about this. He put out an Instagram video directly about it. I saw this on social media the other day. So with this in mind and the fact that they've made these changes, has the launch of the new policies been smooth for the city of Cleveland and for drivers?
I think that that's subjective. I did a story last month where I spoke to downtown business owners that were worried, kind of on both sides. Some people said the churn is good, having that cap, making parking more expensive is going to increase churn for places like restaurants, et cetera, et cetera. But other places like fitness studios said, people are coming here anyway, and this is just an added cost that people might just go to the suburbs or someplace where they don't have to pay as much. And then the real strain is on workers. So you talk about having an 8-hour shift, and if you have a 4-hour cap, you're paying sometimes for that full 4 hours $11, close to $11 to park in some of these areas downtown. So that is subjective, but I think that the complaints have been, loud enough and valid enough, at least in the eye of the mayor's office, that they have altered these policies, which is something, in fairness, that they told me that they were, looking to do with that data usage going forward.
The video did say, we promised we would listen, and we are listening and making adjustments. All right, we're going to take another quick break. We have a few more stories to go here on the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable. I'm Stephanie Haney, and for Mike McIntyre, we'll be right back.
And
Welcome back to the Sound of Ideas Reporters Roundtable from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Stephanie Haney in for Mike McIntyre. Joining us today, we have Karen Kassler from the State House News Bureau and also IdeaStream Public Media's Abby Marshall and Matt Richmond. Now, this story is something that is certainly making people very happy, a certain group of people very happy in Summit County. 17,000 Akron residents will have their medical debt taken care of thanks to a new partnership between the city and a national nonprofit, Undo Medical Debt. Residents receiving debt relief will get a letter in the mail over the next week or two to be notified. So, Abby, who qualifies for this debt relief and how much debt has the organization agreed to take over?
Yeah, so Akron residents at or below 400% of the poverty line, which is just over $100,000 for a family of three, or carry debt at or above 5% of their annual income are eligible, and the nonprofit is erasing just under $20 million in debt relief, which is something that we've seen in other cities. Cleveland used the same organization, I believe, a year ago to erase medical debt for over 161,000 people.
Wow. Now, this partnership with Undo Medical Debt started in 2023. So how did this initiative get started?
Yeah, so Akron's mayor, Shamus Malik, thanked the former Ward 1 council member, Nancy Holland, and two medical students at the Northeast Ohio Medical University for spearheading that initiative and making sure that residents are getting that much needed relief.
How does the agreement work? Can people apply for this?
So they'll actually just get a letter in the mail saying that, hey, Undo Medical Debt has purchased. So they purchased $20 million of medical debt, and then they will get a letter saying, hey, don't worry about it, basically.
So you don't have to take any steps?
No.
Seems like it's just kind of being handled. Okay, great. Now, there's a proposed Ohio House bill that would require a certificate of life to be filed after a fetal heartbeat is detected. This would also require all fetal deaths, including miscarriages and abortions, to be registered with the state. So, Karen, who's proposing this law and what types of information would be required here?
Well, I'm just catching up on this one. So this is just another effort in many ways to kind of put new rules on abortion in Ohio. It's being carried by Republican Gene Schmidt, who's very staunchly anti-abortion. And you've got a couple of bills that are like this, even though Ohioans did approve an amendment to the Constitution that would guarantee access to abortion and reproductive rights. There are still these kinds of bills that are being proposed to kind of move away from that or chip away at that as those activists who are against this would say. I mean, there's one right now that would kind of reinstitute a 24-hour waiting period, which there's litigation right now on whether a 24-hour waiting period is legal under that constitutional amendment.
All right, another recently proposed House bill aims to make it easier for women to get menopausal hormone therapy. It's nicknamed the HOTI Act, and the bill would realign Ohio's insurance standards with updated federal guidance. So, Karen, the bill was just introduced, but can we predict how likely do we think it'll make it through the Ohio legislature?
Well, it does have about 19 co-sponsors, and it's joint sponsored. So there's 21 people who are involved. They're all Democrats, and that tends to not bode well for legislation. But the sponsors of this, who are both women, Representative Ashley, the name is escaping me here. But anyway, the two representatives who are involved in this, Ashley Bryant Bailey, there we go, and Anita Samani, there we go. They say that this is a workforce issue. There's a lot of women who are affected by menopausal symptoms, and hormone replacement therapy can help them, but some insurance companies won't pay for that, and so they want to require insurance companies to pay for that.
All right, let's talk about today, and today being the start of spring. It's been a real roller coaster for weather over the last week. We had warm temperatures. We had a windstorm that knocked out power for thousands, with outages lasting well into this week for some. We had below freezing temperatures for part of the week. It made for a very chilly St. Patrick's Day parade in downtown Cleveland. Now, by some reporting, it may have been the coldest in decades, but in about an hour, spring arrives. Temperatures appear to have gotten the memo and will be in the 50s for Cleveland today, maybe even into the 60s and warmer away from the lake. Are we buying it? Matt, how do you feel? Is spring going to stick around this time?
Yes, I can tell because my dog's arthritis is improving already.
Good. I love that sign of
Yes.
spring.
Yeah.
What's your dog's name?
His name is Aiden.
Okay, Aiden. We love that. What about you, Abby? What do you think?
I don't know. I'll believe it when I see it. I feel like we've had so many false starts and a literal hunk of flaming space rock fell over Cleveland today. So I don't think it's, it's this week is wonky. Who knows? I could be wrong.
Yeah, I didn't mention the hunk of flaming space rock from Tuesday when I was talking about the weather anomalies. Karen, what do you think? Is spring in it for us now?
All I know is 2 weeks from today, I will be in the studio with you folks because I will be coming to Cleveland for the home opener for the Guardians. That is spring. Let's go.
Yes. And we do know, today's the start of astronomical spring and the vernal equinox. So meteorologists consider March 1st to be the start of spring. Although, given the weather that we have had this March, I just don't know about that. But very excited for, anyway, astronomical spring to begin today. And that wraps up the show for today. My thanks to Matt Richmond and Abby Marshall of IdeaStream Public Media. Thanks for being here.
Of course.
Sure. My pleasure.
And also our State House News Bureau Chief, Karen Kassler. Thanks for calling in, Karen.
Have a great weekend.